Hi, friends. Welcome to another episode of That Sounds Fun. I'm your host, Annie F. Downs, and I'm so happy to be here with you today. It is a very special week around here, as you probably know. For this year on That Sounds Fun, we're doing interview episodes every Monday in our series, That Sounds Fun, The Seasons. As we are in our last few weeks of winter, it has been so good and important for us to all sit in winter, to experience it, to talk about it, to love it and hate it. I've heard from you. Some of you hate it. I've never been so anticipatory for spring in my whole life as I am this year. So that's every Monday with a TSF Seasons guidebook that goes along with each episode. And if you don't have that already, you can get that at anniefdowns.com/seasons. We also have an episode at the beginning of every season with Pastor Mike Kelsey. If you haven't heard the winter episode, I really suggest going back and listening to it. We'll link it in the show notes. It's been really, really helpful for me to have his wisdom and thoughts in the back of my mind as we walk through this winter. Then a few times a month, we'll have a Thursday show for you like this, an essay from me, just some thoughts and ideas I'm processing in real time. And we call those Always Annie episodes because I am, in fact, always Annie. Then we'll also have an episode of Annie and Eddie Keep Talking. It's the last Thursday of the month with our good buddy, Eddie Kaufholz. Last month, I told you how much Nashville means to me and how it feels to have my heart living in two cities right now. I'm here today in New York City, the other city I call home, and the other city that does, in fact, hold my heart. To be honest, it is easier to love this city in the spring and the fall. It is not natural for me to thrive in winter. And in a city that invites you to be out in the winter every day, it's challenging me, which I'm thankful for most of the time. 2 days ago, we released Where Did TJ Go? A children's book about grief and loss. But most important to me, it's a book about my nephews, Sam and TJ. TJ was born in June of 2022 and died later that summer. I already loved New York back then, but it never crossed my mind to consider this city a home. The grief of losing TJ was profound that fall of 2022. TJ was the saddest tragedy I have ever experienced. His death, the saddest thing I've ever experienced. But within a month or so of his death, I also tore my meniscus disc in my left knee. And we had a major trauma happen in our church and in my up-close friend group. I remember saying at the time to people, any one of these things individually feels sadder than I know what to do with. I guess with all three, when they happen at once, maybe that's the only way I would have survived this, as like one huge tidal wave. I'm an extrovert, as you know, and I identify most closely with type 7 on the Enneagram. But aside from all of that, I have always been me, always Annie, right? And historically, feeling sad is really kind of against my better judgment. I do not enjoy it at all. I actually thought that was true of all of us, but apparently it isn't. Apparently some of you like feeling sad, and even more of you just accept that sadness is part of life and something you can learn from and appreciate. Very mature of you. That has historically not been me. But when you get crushed by grief, you aren't really given a choice. In 2022, maybe for the first time in my life, the grief was actually more powerful than my ability to push it down and push it all away and get busy enough to barely feel it. I way more than barely felt it. I didn't grieve well that fall, I don't think. We released a book, Chase the Fun, in the middle of it all. And all the details of my personal grief, we had decided to keep off the internet. Part of that was because much of the trauma wasn't mine to share. And Part of that was a decision by our family to have TJ's little life and death stay out of the public view for a while. All very understandable, but what it led to in me was a day job with one personality, the one you saw online and at events, and nights and weekends, a totally different version of me, a deeply grieving version of me. Split personality didn't work long for me. They both began to bleed into each other pretty profoundly, and I was, in general, a mess. That fall of 2022 brought lots of counseling appointments and important conversations and prayer and work towards grief, leading towards healing. And then by the winter, 2 years ago, as 2022 turned into 2023, it felt like things were settling. The analogy that comes to my mind right now is of a boat in a storm as the storm dissipates. And that's when I came up to New York City for a New Year's celebration with my friends. And that's the meal, you've probably heard the story, where my friend Mary Kate encouraged me to consider if I would ever want to spend more time in the city. That meal kicked off this wild 16 months that I could not have predicted of living in two cities and having a life here in New York, something I genuinely barely dreamed about before that. I didn't think about my grief very much in 2023 or in 2024 or in New York City, really. I didn't think about my grief. Of course, I think a lot about my nephew, and a lot I thought about my knee surgery that repaired the meniscus disc in my left knee, and the other traumas and sadnesses of that season come to mind a lot. But I didn't think about my grief, like what I was doing with my grief and my sadness, until a few months ago. The book, Where Did TJ Go?, was written and being edited and created. And we knew this week was coming, that there would be a week when the book would exist and you would be able to have it for you and your family as well. And a few months ago, I started to think about what it had been like to walk through these last 2.5 years. And I realized, without even really knowing it, God gave me New York so that I had a place to go and grieve. Where do you go to grieve? Where can you do that? I didn't realize that was part of this whole plan, but God seems to always do things in a kaleidoscope kind of way, where one opportunity or one event or one relationship or one seemingly random encounter usually has these multiple purposes and multiple gifts. That is certainly true of New York for me. In the summer of 22, I went to a couple of different places to grieve, friends' homes, went on some trips, went to certain restaurants, to the movie theater, to my bed. But it's like God knew I needed this whole other thing, this whole other place, this loud, big, constant city. A place to walk and cry and dream and think alongside a few million other people doing similar things. It may be different for you. You may need a quiet weekend at the beach or in a cabin. You may need an evening out with friends at your favorite Mexican restaurant. You may need a 6-month cruise. But we all need places where we can go to grieve, not just people, but places. I remember my friend Betsy telling me pretty early in this dual citizenship life that it would be normal to see people crying as they walk down the sidewalk here. Betsy lived in New York for a while and was explaining some things for me to expect. Crying on the sidewalk? Just in front of everyone? I asked her in response. She said, absolutely. She reminded me that here in New York, nobody really has front yards or backyards. And most apartments are so small that there isn't much space inside to process. So everyone treats the sidewalks and certainly the parks like their own. And there's just this like citywide understanding that we all let each other do that. Betsy was right. The first time I cried on a sidewalk, I sent her a video. Look at me. I said, I am now one of the people who cry on a New York City sidewalk. I don't think I realized how much I needed New York in this specific way. I can tell you 1,000 other ways I've grown to need New York in my life, but I didn't know I needed New York to be a place where I came to grieve, a place where I came to feel, a place where I came to process and think and walk and cry my way through Central Park. You need a place to grieve because where you cry is where something good grows too. Where you plant seeds is where you see a harvest. Psalm 126 in the NIV comes to mind. Those who sow with tears will reap with songs of joy. Those who go out weeping, carrying seed to sow, will return with songs of joy. Here it is in the Message version. And now, God, do it again. Bring rains to our drought-stricken lives. So those who planted their crops in despair will shout yes at the harvest. So those who went off with heavy hearts will come home laughing with armloads of blessing. I'm not a fan of tying bows on things, as you know, but I love what these verses tell us. What is true is your grief matters because it is planting something in the ground that you will harvest. But you have to go somewhere. You have to have a place to plant, a place to grieve, a place to weep and mourn and let those seeds fall to the ground. I do not know what will be harvested here for me, but I have planted many a seed of grief around Central Park. Wherever home is, I believe I'll go back there someday with laughter and armloads of blessings. So where do you go to grieve? What places have mattered to you as you weep? I would really love to hear. If you'll head to That Sounds Fun podcast on Instagram, would you share with us? Where have you sown seeds that you are waiting to see the harvest? Or have you already seen it? Are you on the other side? Like, can you tell us what it is like there on the other side of planting these seeds of grief that lead to armloads of blessings? I would love to hear your story. And if you haven't gotten your copy of Where Did TJ Go, today's a great day to order it. Grab your copy, come meet my nephews, and see what encouragement God might have for you in the pages of a book for children. Children's books are never just for kids, you know. You can get your copy wherever you love to buy books, and please share with your friends. So many families have experienced the grief our family experienced. And we believe this book will help them as they process loss. Y'all have a great weekend. Go out or stay home and do something that sounds fun to you, and I will do the same. What sounds fun to me? Well, the weather is going to remain cold this weekend in New York, but the sun is coming out and ready to shine on us. So this will not surprise you, but I'm going to go for a walk in Central Park. Mostly around the reservoir. It's my favorite spot. We'll see you back here on Monday with another episode of That Sounds Fun, The Seasons, where we turn a corner a bit and answer an important question. Where is the hope of winter? Yes, let's talk about hope. And our guest is a favorite, Maddie Jackson. Cannot wait for y'all to hear this conversation. We'll see you Monday.